And 3, 2, 1, and welcome to the Spiritual Gentleman Podcast, episode number 3. And I'm here with the amazing Jonathan Steeman, who I met through the ADHD men's support group, where this video will definitely be going out to. I want to say welcome to the podcast, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, David. Thanks you for having me, and also for your audience. And thank you for doing this. I think it's very important to share more about the recent findings and coaching around ADHD. So I'm Jonathan Steeman. I'm 39 years old, live in the Netherlands, have 2 kids. I'm happily divorced, have a new relationship. And I've been finding ways to basically hack into ADHD so that you get all the benefits and not so much the downsides. That's what I'm all about.
Yeah, no, I love that myself as well. So may I ask, because I always find it because so many in the group are from the United States. So I'm curious, for someone from the Netherlands, is ADHD because I know in Ireland it's a bit of a stigma. So how is ADHD viewed in the Netherlands? And is it something that the government and people are kind of like, hey, let's help? Or is it kind of like, you're just a lazy fecker kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I like the question, and specifically because every country has a different approach, right? And very recently, I found a really interesting distinction. So it's like in the US, there's different camps, right, in every country. There's go natural or go medication, or a combination of 2. But these basically really generalize. There's 2 camps. But I see in the US, it's like 70-30.
Jonathan.
And then we have
very cool. Sorry, you paused there. Yeah. Freezing up just a little bit there.
60-30. Let me fix that.
Go on.
Yeah, so basically, in the US they have 70%, 30%, 70 for medication, and 30% all natural. And then in the Netherlands it's more I think it's 60-40%, right? And then I'm just watching because I found one of the posts of a Dutch ADHD forum of a person who have been moving to Germany, actually, and she was searching for a psychiatrist to give her the medication, but nobody's wanting to do that. That's not what they normally do. So it's interesting, right? So it's almost like how healthcare is organized will dictate how the people basically evolve, and also the trust for certain medication, right? So if you look at and then there's the second thing. It's like the society thing, and I think that really depends how you look at it. So I don't think that I do recognize that ADHD can be a challenge, but I think mostly I think that the ADHD brain is more sensitive to a Western lifestyle, to be really blunt. And that means drinking, smoking, taking normal food from the supermarket, which you think is good, but it goes really far into the brain. It negatively affects the function of the brain. And many things that you eat or unhealthy life habits basically block blood flow to optimally flow to your brain. And the first brain area that it negatively influences is the prefrontal cortex. And that's the control center, like we all know, right? So that's one element. And you know, our lifestyle doesn't support a normal functioning person. Let's say it will definitely affect an ADHD person. So yeah, so that said, in the Netherlands, there's a lot of misunderstanding, I guess. And there's yeah, and it's yeah, I don't know. It's what I really found interesting about the Netherlands is that there's in Amsterdam, there was just a report like a year ago or something. There's a ADHD center in Amsterdam, and where you can actually get your diagnosis, and you do testing and all that stuff, right? So, and just to be clear, I think medication is really a serious thing. It is, if you need it, you need it. And I think it's very serious. We shouldn't underestimate that. But the problem is that it almost seems like if it's easy to diagnose, right, then I'm starting to doubt that system, right? So this company in Amsterdam, that ADHD diagnosis company, was been, you know, they tested that, right? They did some trials and testing, and there were some people that were complaining that worked there and said, look, it's not going how it should go. And the finding is that 80%, right, 80% of the people who go there will get a positive outcome for ADHD diagnosis, whether they have it or not.
Exactly. It's almost like in before, particularly California and a few states in the US, before they legalized marijuana, when it was still for medical only, you would go to the doctor and say, ow, my shoulder hurts, here you go, right? And it's that same kind of thing of where, and it's interesting too, because when we look at treatment for ADHD treatment, it wasn't made by neurodiverse people, it was made by neurotypical people. So you look at it from the neurotypical standpoint. I agree with you, right? Medication is a very serious thing to take. You know, me personally, I don't want to be on a thing for the rest of my life if I don't have to. And as you're getting to the point, diet, right? Like diet is a huge thing that, and especially as you were saying too, particularly about our Western culture and our consumer culture. You know, we want everything now and fast, and our brains love like, ooh, dopamine, yeah, oh, dopamine here, and then you're like, and then after all this dopamine, you're like, and you're crashed out, right? It's like, exactly. Like you're doing like an 8-ball of dopamine, and then you're like, and then you want to hit more and more and more, but it doesn't bring you, then it crashes out your system, right? It's finding that balance.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And what you're saying about neurotypical design this, and I think so I'm like, I like to theorize about this, right? And this is how I look at the world. So it really resonates with me what you just said, because a lot of people with ADHD go to a doctor with the complaint that they're not fitting the frame, they're not up to the standards, right? But also with real serious issues, right? So there's two elements to that, and there's one element is like, okay, how is your lifestyle supporting? I already told something about that, right? But there's also like, where is the neurodiversity, right? So I think that we need to come up with some kind of like a new name, like neurodiscrimination, because I don't remember which book it was, but there's like a book that talks about a study of a tribe in Namibia or something, like an African state, and they had like a tribe, and they followed that tribe for like 10-20 years. And it was one of these tribes where they found the transition from hunter-gatherer to farming, right? So an interesting finding was that they looked at different people, different persons and status, and there were these guys that called hunters, very successful hunters. They're very high in stature in rank.
The high status and like they're the leader of the tribe, right? They're the high of the tribe because they're the ones
very
going
important.
out.
Yes, everybody respects them. Exactly. Yeah,
exactly. So, they bring home the meat, right? Like it's
yes.
you got bring home the bacon, so to speak.
Exactly. And they're healthy. They're feeling good. They have sense of fulfillment. They feel like they're needed, right? That kind of stuff. So they followed that while these tribes were going to transition to farming land. So skip forward 20 years later, what happened? It turned around. These people didn't have any purpose anymore. They were spit on, literally. They were useless. They couldn't do certain things. There was no function for them at all. So that's just a very interesting finding from that research, right? I mean, how does that translate to today? And this is what I look for. It's like, so we're neurotypical people. They're neurotypical people and people who have like a slightly different kind of thinking, right? But guess what? We need everything, right? We need everything. But the situation, the condition, the area that we live in has changed. So we have all these senses, all this information coming to us, and an ADHD mind can be very sensitive to all of that information. It tries to work through everything, right? Which can, it drains your mind. It drains you. Everybody's ADHD or no ADHD, doesn't matter what kind of mind you have. If you have like normal sleep, like normal regular sleep, 4 hours a day for complex tasks, that's all you have. You can stretch it to 6 if you do like 20-30 minutes naps in the afternoon, but that's all you can do on a day for a complex task. So now we're in this new time, and we just have all of this information coming at us, right?
And so many complicated tasks, right? And so many tasks that are complex, right?
Yeah.
Like the issues that we deal with now versus the hunter-gatherer, right? I love the example of the hunter-gatherer there, because I was reading a study about how a lot of the hunter-gatherers probably had ADHD because they're the ones who weren't getting eaten by the tiger because they're like, oh, where's the tiger, right? Like it was a biological thing. And I love what you were talking too, because I like to view ADHD, it's like, you're a PC and a sea of Macs, right? Or you're a PC and the sea of like Linux, right? You're Linux, everyone else is PC and Mac. You just have a different operating system. It just means you operate a little bit differently. Doesn't mean that you can't like interact, but it's, Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And I like to, so what I think is like, okay, so everybody wants to fit in, right? And it's normal, it's natural, right? Everybody wants to feel connected, and we're all human beings afraid of losing connection, right? And I think that's a very important key thing. And that's why we want to change ourselves so that we can fit in. And I sometimes think, but I'm not generalizing, but I sometimes think that the general decision towards like real strong generalization, right? No, but that a lot of people go to a doctor because they look for that change, so that these medication will change their brain structure in such a way so they can operate like a neurotypical, right? And of course that has a certain ring to it, and I think a lot of people benefit from it. I don't want to shame that at all, because it's a really serious thing, but you're taking a risk. And what I say is that, so that they recently had a study done in the US. I believe it's like in 2021. It was about depression. And they basically did some tests about how many people would benefit from medication for depression, right? As an example. And it was like 60% benefited from that medication, right? It's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
But what about the 40%? We're in a pandemic of depression and all that stuff going on, right? So what does that say to you? That's the quality of healthcare. So I'm sorry, but I don't want to play doctors down. I'm sorry to say this. I hate to say this actually, because if I want to go to a doctor, then how much trust do you put in that he will give you the best treatment, right? How much?
Exactly. And it's interesting too, right? Because, and once it goes back to kind of the beginning of the conversation too, of how other countries view it, as someone who's from the United States, but has lived in Ireland and lived in different parts of Europe and seen other medical systems in play and in practice, it's really fascinating to me on how we handle these really, because like all over the world, right? Everyone, like, it's the same thing, but we handle it in all different kind of ways. And how you actually put it, like in Ireland, there's still much a big stigma around ADHD. It's, oh, you must be lazy. We're going to get out the Irish Catholic guilt and just say that you're like not motivated in this, instead of like, how can we work with you, right? And especially I think in the United States, it's due, and and this is my own kind of personal thing of like, if you don't put a lot of money into the government, then you're not going to feel like you're going to get a lot out of the government. If you put very little into it, then you're not going to expect a lot, especially in the US in a for-profit system. And Ireland is a public-private system. So if I'm going to someone to, especially in the US where certain things, particularly with drug laws, where you can, if you ever go to the United States, you turn on the television, almost every other commercial is a drug commercial.
Yeah.
So are they just pushing a pill on me? This is why we're in the US is suffering an opioid epidemic, right?
Yes.
Like, is because do we push a pill to solve a problem when that only handles one small issue of a whole totality of things? And it's really, it's a fat, like, that's a whole, we could go like 2 hours on like into healthcare debate. And it's, but like, I think at the end of the day, I don't think it's the individual doctor, but it's the system in place of like, is it set up to help the citizen, or is it set up to help the doctor and the company? What is the ultimate aim? And unfortunately, I think in healthcare, countries have to take a bath. They have to take a loss on it, because if you're trying to make it for a profit in a capitalistic society, the one that will lose most will be the patient. And if you want the patient to win the most, you need to put them first and put profit second. And it's so hard. Because, when I know a lot of Americans will be like, oh, particularly like, I know Netherlands, and you go into the rest of the Scandinavian countries, socialism, but it's like, I don't want to divert into that, but it's, when we start to look at the totality of what's our lifestyle like, I find always fascinating that fresh fruit costs more than the candy bar. Right? Like, which is then when you have only so much money, what are you going to where's your purchasing power going to go towards? It's going to go to the thing that's going to put at least a little something in your stomach and give you that sugar hit, because now you're addicted to the dopamine and you go. So, that's really fascinating. I want to transition. I want to ask you another question. So when were you diagnosed? Were you late diagnosed, early diagnosed?
Yeah. So I never got diagnosed because I didn't really trust that whole system. But I surely have all
you check out, like, you don't have the official thing, but you can check off the thing.
Especially a couple of years ago. But it went a little bit like this, right? When I was like 10 years old, I was like, I was playing soccer on the field in the grass field in front of our house, and all of a sudden everybody said like, time out, everybody, we need to drink. So everybody waved out to their homes, right? And we go at the fountain, we drank water straight from the fountain, and then we got 5 minutes, we go back, right? But this time was different, because now my mother came down and she said, Jonathan, we need to talk, because people around us on school, parents, friends, family, they say that you need medication because you act a certain way. And I was pretty energized and all that stuff, right? And it was a really interesting moment, because like a year ago, I called my mother to thank her that she said that there was nothing wrong with me, right?
Yeah.
But you know what she said was like stunned me, because she said, look, Jonathan, really thank you for, and I feel your love on that, and really thank you for saying this, but it was actually you who said that. You said that there's nothing wrong with you, and you're feeling fine, can I now play football again? Right?
Yeah, especially at the age of 10, right? Because I was put on medication at the age of 9, and it's that thing of like, you're now different, right? And it's this, I know, because I've been meeting a lot of people who now get late diagnosis or have like finally found the aha of, okay, this helps explain why I act of how I act, and it doesn't make me less than anyone else. It just makes me unique and different in a way that, I'm still a human being, I still bleed red, just like every other human being on the planet, and how I view the world gives me a unique perspective, just like a neurotypical person has a unique perspective based on their life experiences. That's amazing. So how many years ago did you really kind of start the journey of really understanding about kind of wanting to figure out about yourself?
Yeah, I think so when that was a really profound moment, like when I was a kid, and my mother went with it, and she basically said, okay, we'll have a look at what we can do. So we looked at like food colorings. We eliminated lots of sugar from the diet. There was a lot of other stuff went on, like what is it again? There were a couple of things that were removed from my diet. And eventually I turned into my teens, right? Like really deciding everything on my own, start to drink some alcohol and that kind of stuff. But that's really, so I didn't have medication. Everything was pretty fine, right? It was just like I was a little weird kid in the class and needed a little bit more attention, right? That was true, but it wasn't the problem because we looked at food that much, right? And nowadays you even have like these very color red dye-ish.
Red dye number 45.
That's
green
crazy.
3, number 7, 6, 8.
That
and
kind
it's
of
like,
stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you know the numbers, yeah. So
it's some weird thing, right? Like you can't even pronounce half the shit in it. It's
exactly. And you know what? So that was very early. But I was always looking like, because I was talking with other people with ADHD and they had medication, right? Okay, fine. So why didn't I have the same thing, right? And I just have a completely different life. So it's really interesting. So now I can look at, I'm now like almost 40, and I can really look at what happened. Of course, I had my challenge, right? I had depression. I even had at one time, I wanted to commit suicide. It was a really terrible time. That was my low in my life, but that was the low. And then I stood up like, I'm never gonna look back at this, but because I'm worthy and I believe I have a gift to offer to the world and I cannot take it away.
Well, so, I'm grateful that you're here because I've also been in that point too. And I love that phrase you said, I'm worthy. One of the things that I had to work on for my own personal kind of self-development is I had for many years was a sign on my door that said, I am worth it and worthwhile. And I would repeat that to myself because I had built this negative spiral in myself that I had to reprogram. And it was by truly believing that I am worth it and worthwhile and I have value to the world.
I call that process unlabeling because I was looking in how did I do all the things, right? Because I'm now fairly successful, right? I got 6 digits. I work in IT, which is a very good scene for me, right? I'm also doing coaching, training, personal development, and I'm very fast in learning, right? But in order to sustain that for longer periods of time, I had to also look at not just do what my mind can, also find ways to implement so that I can support that level, right? Because eventually you want more, right? Yeah. But then also you have to do less to calm down. And there's a really, like, I think the lining of, the line that you have to walk on with the ADHD mind it's much thinner than neurotypical. So you're faster in burning the reserves. So it's really important to know this. And because I found that, so I used to go with, okay, I have ADHD. I started to identify with that because I ignored it, right, for a long time. But then I started to identify with it. And then all of a sudden, I start to see all of these challenges, brain fog, focus, all these issues like social anxiety and all this stuff, and even things that I didn't know were there but I read about it, and all of a sudden I had it. I was like, that's interesting. And I just was in the moment in my life that I learned that if you identify with something, you become it. So then I had an experiment like, okay, let's turn it around. Let's say, so let's do like a brain map, right? In the middle, there's ADHD, and then here's a complaint, focus, here's a complaint, social anxiety, I can't read, all these things, right? But then you cross this in the middle, you remove the label, right? And now you only have these areas. And then you choose one, and that's where you can then work on and focus on. And the reason why I started doing that is because if you identify with something that you're not able to do it, then you won't be able to do it. It's like when you, with getting your driving license, right? Imagine that okay, you're in your last lesson, your how do you call it? Your teacher is saying to you like, okay, David, you're ready to take the exam. And then you can respond in two ways, right? You think like, yeah, really? I don't think so. Or, yeah, I think I'm ready.
Yeah.
But it's totally different in energy and experience. And in what kind of setting do you think you will get more success of achieving the exam in the first go?
It would be with the sense of like, I am a driver, right? It's creating that identity of like, I am, and it's the power of the word I am too. And I love what you're talking about identity too, because one of the things that I find, particularly with ADHD or any kind of labels we put on ourselves, is recognize that first we've created that label, like that is label we're creating for our innermost self, and what you choose to do with it, right? Like, you know, I'm an alcoholic, but it's also, all right, because I am, but that means now I can handle the issues around it. And like you said, I cross out the alcoholic part, and now I have all the other things around it. And it's like eating an elephant, right? Like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I'm not going to be able to solve all of my issues at once, but if I take, and I love how you keep going back to diet, because I was a chef for 20 years. So I love food. So, and it's that, you know, like, all right, if I can start working on this one aspect, and it's so interesting because how that one thing will then branch off to another, to another, to another. And it just, you see this, at least for me, this natural cascade, when I start to put focus in that, you know, some things kind of balance out a little bit, but then that usually ends up answering another question or leads a web to another thing of like, okay, now I'm going to go work on this part. Oh, and then, you know, I saw that, now I'm going to work on this one, and then work on this one.
Exactly. And one of the challenges that I first looked at when I started to do that dissection of the identity, right? Because that's unlabeling, right? That's unlabeling. You're dissecting that, and to not identify with it, it's like this, then it's fixed. You cannot change it, right? Now you unlabel it, you remove the label. Remember, you remove you only have the complaints, and these are challenges, and challenges can be solved. So now you just focus on one, because it can be overwhelming, right? So just focus on one. For example, reading. So I've noticed that a lot of people in the ADHD community on Facebook and these groups talk about that they can't read, or they get distracted really fast and all that stuff, right? So I was like, that's a nice challenge. If I could fix that. So let's try that. So what I did, I started to read, and I started to measure how long it took before I got distracted, right? And then initially it was like 1 minute, and then I was like really irritated because like, you know, that's kind of stuff. Maybe I should put a book away. But then it's like, does it help to get irritated? Would it distract even more if I respond to that? And then I learned a very key item, right? Don't read in the end of the night or end of the day when you've drained all your energy. So I started working in reading in the morning. Fresh energy. I still have all the batteries up. Started to go better. 2 minutes. The second thing blew my mind. I started to refocus, because the problem is not focus, because our attention span is just our attention span. but it's about you are focused on something, you get distracted, but you refocus. That was the key, right?
Especially like this is one of the things I tell people in meditation, right? When I guide people through meditations, your mind waters. You say mind is water, and then you bring it back. And the thing isn't of like, I'm going to hold no thought. It's taking that time from the wander to there, and the judgment is coming to bringing the needle back into place. Because there's another thing too, is that, but if we really like a book, we can hyper focus and read that book in 20 minutes, and it can be a huge novel. So
exactly.
It's like,
you hit the sweet spot there, the 20 minutes, because that's the additional thing. If you get distracted, if you watch a boring movie, that's because you're not engaged, right?
Yeah.
So if you read a book like you did on school, and a finger will help getting faster, but if you read a book with a certain pace that you did on school, because a lot of people with ADHD haven't read for 20 years or something, like 10, 20 years, right? So they think that they should be able to a certain skill, but didn't do anything for 20 years.
And they have none of the practice, right? Because it's the lack of practice. Like, I know I struggle with writing, right? But because when I was 9 and put on medication, I was a kid in a private school. They're like, okay, you know what? You can type on the computer. You don't have to write anymore. So now when I go down to write in journals or anything else, those 6 years of practice, I don't have there, right? That 6 years of the action taking, of the doing this, creates the thing. It's, not what's on the page, but it's that action, creating that neural link of like, okay, this is the thing that I got to do. And now anytime I write or spell, I still have to bring myself back, because it's like, then I'll be like, oh, and then I'll turn myself into that 3-year-old, that 10-year-old kid again. I'm like, I can't spell, I can't write, shit.
And it's the language. Yes, exactly. It's also in the language. Then you start to label yourself again, and then you're basically turning it off, the function. Our brain is very efficient. So if you say, I can't do it, just like with the driving thing, right? You're ready for exam, yes or no? that you're turning things off. You're physically turning it off. If you would put a monitor or like a brain scan on it, would you think there would be more activity into, yes, of course I can, or no, I don't think I can, right? Where's the energy? Right?
Exactly. Like even in your tone of voice, right? It requires more energy because you're saying the yes, you're like, oh, right? Like you're creating that energy versus, ooh, right? Like that's like, all right, it's so what's going to light up more is if you're, like, it goes back to one of those like Newton's laws, right? Law of motion. An object at rest will stay at rest, an object in motion will stay at motion. So if you want to stay, keep that energy going, you got to keep it kind of moving along, but it's so hard when you're slow down. So it's I love that. That's fantastic.
So additionally to the reading, right? So eventually I had like 2 minutes without distraction, I could refocus again. But then I started to have problems with really understanding the content, and I started reading, but it didn't go in. And that's where I started to think like, oh, wait a second, what did I do? Did I sleep right last night? What did I drink last night? Right? And then I started to experiment without drinking alcohol. And then I found some improvement even more, right? So that's where my journey started with the real unlabeling. And then I started to attack all these different areas, right? Even social anxiety, I found out that I'm actually sensitive, again, for gluten. So I'm like it could be a little woo-woo for a lot of people. Like there's a lot of stigma about gluten, but I don't have problems with my belly on that. But so I cut it out of my diet, right, for a couple of weeks. And then I started to notice that I feel more calm. And I could focus even more and longer, like 5 minutes or something like that, right?
Oh, especially going with the diet, because my fiance, we kind of found out recently she has a gluten allergy intolerance, and really she can and so she can feel not officially diagnosed celiac yet, but it's like when she has a little bit of gluten, her belly pops out, her energy drops, right? Like and when she goes abstaining for a long enough time, anytime she like craves the donut, and then she takes the donut, and then like like 5 minutes later, she's like, oh, why'd you make me eat the donut?
Exactly. And that's my point. Even with sugar in combination with gluten, it costs a lot of energy to digest. If I look at the brain of the ADHD, right, it's like a Ferrari, right?
Yeah.
But if you have a Ferrari, right, or which car would you like to have, like a Toyota or a Ferrari, right? A Ferrari, okay?
Yeah.
But then to which, so if it needs maintenance, would you still send it to the same garage as you would with your Toyota?
No, you would send it to
No.
you'd send it to the Ferrari. You'd send it to the high-end guy who knows how to work on those kinds of cars, right? Like
exactly. So back to your metaphor, like what you said about healthcare, like these doctors and treatments were designed by neurotypicals. That is like the economic garage. Healthcare needs to be paid for. It is expensive, right? And even in the Netherlands, where almost everything is paid. We have a little, if we have something, we need to pay a little bit, but until a certain limit, and then everything is covered. But you have to understand that healthcare it's on a big scale. You have to look like, okay, how do we design healthcare for this country? Okay, the first question they're asking is like, what is the lifestyle like? Oh, it's Western. Okay, we have to accommodate for cancer, depression, ADHD, and all that stuff. Because they are not going to say to you that you have to change your lifestyle, right? They built the whole system. It's not jacked, I think, because it's built around our lifestyle. And as soon as you understand that, then you can unlabel yourself, because then you can say, look, I'm going to do a little bit better than the average people, a little bit healthier than the average, and then you're already well on the way of having a better quality life. And that's what I found. And I think everybody can do that, with or without medication to start with, right? Do what you think is safe. Do it with a pedestrian, with a doctor. Do it together. Make them your friend, because they you know, it's also about safety. That's also right. That's also true. But I believe that there's a lot of restoration possible. You know, that's what I've invested in heavily, and I've applied a lot of strategies, and I found a lot of results. And I think everybody can do that. You know that from food, right? And exactly the example with your girlfriend.
Yeah.
Energy. If you have a Ferrari, right? And you expect everybody sees your Ferrari, and you think, I'm gonna crush it again today. And then you start driving, and then you take a little bit of gluten or the wrong gasoline, right? What happens then? Your motor chokes, but you still expect it to go that certain level. So you start to push, right? So you start to push it.
And it's funny, as ADHDers, right? We expect, like, we'll put the wrong gasoline in our tank and still expect, like, to be at the same level of a neurotypical, thinking, oh, we have to be able to, like, and then so we're grinding our gears trying to get to the same thing when we're like, no, that's not working.
Yeah, and it's really relatable, but there's also a serious message in this. Yeah, because this is the road that leads to depression, burnout, and all kinds of nasty stuff. If you don't realize that. We are gifted, right? I know it's a lot of stigma on that, because it's not always gifted. There's also really bad things of it. I agree. But I also think that if you have been gifted a certain car, like a Ferrari, right? Then would it make sense to try to figure it out, how the Ferrari works and what it needs? Because it's not going to be the same as a neurotypical. Exactly. How would your life go and change if you invest in that, right?
Exactly. It's like okay, like typical people have been given spoons and we've been given a fork, right? Like it's this, okay, both are tools, but knowing how to use the tool to your advantage. I like to look at, personally for me, ADHD, especially when I'm working with clients, I try to make them to the mindset, the shift of, think about it like diabetes, because so much of us with ADHD think we're a broken person, right? That we must be broken, that we're ineffective, that we must have been the defect factory, like, we're the factory defect. But in actuality, we're just, you wouldn't say that about someone who had diabetes, like, you have to take care of the tools that you have, right? But it just gives us a different perspective. Yeah, I always find it really weird when people say it's a superpower, a disability. I say it's both and neither at the same time. You've been given a set of cards, right? We've been given a set of cards of our tools, and how you use those tools is what makes it, right? And how you view yourself, right? I think one of the biggest thing for me is learning how to have some self-love and compassion. And like my meds, because I don't take medication, my meds are meditation, exercise, diet, and sleep, right? Like these really basic things that even neurotypical people struggle with, right? Like this isn't just even as men, as we kind of handle and especially as ADHD men, we're sensitive. And I used to think of being sensitive, being emotionally connected was a bad thing, but that's incorrect for me personally, right? Like that allows me to empathize more, allows me to have more human connections, and allows me to feel. It's an amazing thing. I want to make a transition because I'm really curious, because you said you're a father of two boys.
Yes. A son and a daughter.
Son and a daughter. So, because I eventually, I'm 39, I want to have kids soon. So I want to ask you, as a father, how does ADHD and having a father, how does that, have you found any strategies, or has there been some struggles with being a dad with ADHD, or do you find it more helpful? Do you find it more helpful or less helpful having ADHD as a dad?
Yeah, it depends.
It depends on the day.
Which time zone you have been. When I was depressed, it was not a good thing. When I was depressed, it was seriously felt like a disability. And I think that if you have a certain scenario where you really are struggling with, it's okay to think of it like a disability, to focus on it and to make it better. That is what I would add to that, because a lot of people say, like there's a Burkle Russell, I don't know, a very famous doctor, it says like, it's a serious disability and you're stuck. Then you're labeling, you're getting people stuck. And then it's like, you can't do anything about it unless you take medication. I don't believe that's true. I think medication is a last resort, which would definitely help. And a lot of people really have that dependence on it, which is great. Right?
Yeah, but it's a stopgap measure, right? No one wants to be on a pill for the rest of their life. It's
and who am I to say something like that? Yeah, exactly. And who am I to say something like that? I'm not a doctor, right? But I do follow a lot of doctors who go into a new age of innovation. And that's what I follow. So taking it back to my kids. So I've invested a lot of time and energy into strategies, and also like supplements and food, and finding out what works for me so that I can be the best dad. Because if you're in a depression, it's really, really hard to also set an example for your kids, and it destroys you. You really want to be there. And that's something we as people, as men specifically, we really have to step up to do that. And it's tough, it's hard. I know, I've been through that, and I know how it is. But I also can say that there is a way out, and that is by investing in your health. Stop smoking, stop drinking, stop drinking too much caffeine, that kind of stuff. You don't have to do everything at the same time. I took years to remove these little things from my life. People changed about me, the people I talk to, people who give different energy, your life gets an upgrade. And by doing that, you're setting a new standard, a new example for your kids. So because I did this, right, I had several situations with my kids that they were also thinking there was something wrong with them. But I worked with them on a different way, because I've implemented everything myself. So I had certainty that, because who knows? So if your school teacher tells you about, okay, your kid has something wrong, needs some investigation. Oh, okay, we'll follow it, right? Everybody follows that. But I'm like a crazy guy. I just look everything behind what it is and how the system works. I really want to understand what the motivation is. What are their values? What are they sacrificing, right? Because I want the best for me and also for my kids. So knowing that you have a clear view, like the 60-40%, like we talked, right? I don't want to have my kids like a 60-40% chance to have no results and even do damage. Because one of the reasons they put psychosis as a side effect on ADHD medication, or any medication as a matter of fact, is because they don't know which region is understimulated and potentially overstimulate certain regions of the brain, which causes psychosis.
Yeah, so they're just like, all right, we're gonna throw everything out. Here's the Adderall, go for it. You'll stim you up. It'll like it may stim up other parts that you don't need, but like it'll solve the one thing, you know?
It's like a Ferrari, like you have a Ferrari the thing. Yeah. Oh, let's try to do this stuff in. Let's try to change the engine or maybe some other fluids. Let's try this, let's try that. But while you're doing that, your engine gets destroyed, potentially, right? So it's just something I think we have to be aware about. And so I love my children a lot. And if someone else, so if I have to do that choice, I will do that, but with the aim of having it temporary and also have other strategies to change their lifestyles to support their level of performance that they're getting asked. Because nowadays, a lot of pressure is on our kids, especially with recent events like Corona, lockdowns, their social isolation, and they expect to deliver these results.
And as the world continues to advance technologically, right? Like, as we talked about the 4 hours of like of complicated tasks, we're asking kids to do 6 to 8 hours of complicated. We're making these tasks even more and more complicated on how these things are, and we're asking them to, hey, you're just gonna be fine with it, and it's like without giving the structure. I loved how you were talking too about, you know, it's not just the medication, it's a whole lifestyle thing. You know, when we're going back to kind of the argument, is it a disease or not? Like, the problem with kind of the word disease I have sometimes, like, oh, there must be a cure. And the thing is, there's no cure for my ADHD. There's nothing to cure. It's learning how to live a lifestyle so that I'm not a slave to my mind or a slave to my impulses or a slave to my ADHD, but to really bring it out. I've studied NLP. I know you're an NLP coach. How'd you get into NLP? Like, how long you've been doing NLP for?
I think like 10 years ago, 12, something like that. Like, let's say 10 years ago, I started out with a consultancy course. I was an IT consultant. Well, I was actually like an engineer, and all of a sudden I needed to learn to talk with customers so that they understood me. And it was really bad. I was really bad, right? But like 10 years ago, that seed, if you will, was planted because there was a little bit of NLP in it. And then eventually I lost my job. Just a really short, that's a long story, that's for another time. Yeah. But I learned to say no, and then I got fired, which was the best thing that could happen to me, because all of a sudden I was a freelancer in IT, lots of work. I had so much money all of a sudden. So I started to like, oh, maybe I should invest some soft skills. And then I started to do NLP. I done NLP master, NLP trainer.
Oh, for anyone who's listening, NLP stands for Neuro Linguistic Programming. Yes. And you want to just give a very, very quick definition of what that is for anyone that may not know.
Yes. So basically, it's about we give language, we give meaning to things, right? And how we give meaning to things is how we perceive it. That's the shortest version. And the simplest version to explain it is, and everybody can do this, as I think, so I feel, so I do, and as I do, so I have, right? It's like, as I think, so I feel, so I do, so I have. That's the foundation of NLP. And everybody understands that. But not everybody get that lesson on school. And it's very important, because so thoughts are pictures and words we say to ourselves. That's all. right?
Exactly. And going into emotions, right? Because one of the things I teach a lot of my guys is like when you're feeling scared or excited, right? In the body, that's the exact same like response, right? Sweaty palms, heart beating, right? But we've created the word when I was a dating coach, like, and get guys to go talk to a girl, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm too scared. Are you scared or are you actually excited? You've created a word like this. And this is where I've learned I'm not an NLP master whatsoever, but I've learned these little ways. So my next question is going to go into how have you utilized NLP to help with your ADHD? I know we've kind of been talking throughout the whole entire time, or if you've got like a few good pointers, a few good tips.
Yeah, so basically NLP is also about working with fulfillment and identity, right? So one of the things that I do is I unlabel myself, and why? Because if I want to do something in the world, if I feel like I have this thing that really bothers me, that I want to change in the world, right? That really annoys me, I cannot forget about it. That's probably your purpose, because you're probably have something inside of you that you know that it touches. So it's important to identify that kind of thing. But then the question is, if that's your purpose, who do you need to become? And then would something like a limited belief about yourself help you achieve that? Like, really simple. Can I do that? Or I can't do that. Of course I can. Or the language that you talk to yourself, basically.
Like for Lent, I gave up the word can't. I said for the word for the, you know, like I don't know, for like anyone who's, you know, Lent is you give something up. So I decided for the for Lent this year, I'm going to give up the word can't. I'm only going to say can. I'm an American, not Americans. Yes, I'm going to do a can, you know. Yes. Anyways, please continue. Sorry, I got excited there.
No, that's really good. Yeah. And if you say excited, I already see the change in you as well. And that's also about NLP, right? So, but what is the thing about NLP? You become more aware about how your human psychology works and how you start to sabotage yourself. Because if you were, because it was actually me in that driving seat, right, next to that instructor, the teacher for the exam, I didn't believe it first time. So I failed. The second time I failed. But the third time I said, I can do this. And I conditioned myself for like 2 weeks. No, it was like 4 weeks, because I also had to take additional lessons, of course, because, you know. But after I done that, guess what? I wasn't nervous, because I could not see myself failing. I was not playing that movie over and over again, just because I changed my words. That I said, I didn't believe it, but I just changed my words. I repeated like several times a day with energy to myself, and I started to believe it, because of my whole experience about that exam, like the driving license exam, that like was like, wow, it's like I started to get excited about it, right? So the thing is that time I actually made it. So yeah, I can definitely recommend NLP for everybody, especially if in an ADHD world, right? The one thing that I really found is that I went across all of the world with Tony Robbins. I've then been to like 10 different events. I actually got trained by his team. Next to NLP, I'm gonna, you know, I'm still continuing to study. But you need to have two things, right? I've invested heavily in mindset. Guess what what happened to me? I invested all the money and I couldn't get these results, because I didn't invest in my body. So you have like mindset is software, it's the programming, the thoughts that go on in your head, that's the programming. And then you have the hardware, which is your actual physical brain and how it works together with your body. And that was my challenge. But I didn't know that until I started to, and you know, and at the time I didn't knew that. Guess what I was saying about myself, right? I was doubting myself. I didn't see results, right? So it's very important.
Then the self-talk goes, right? Then the inner critic
Yes.
starts going at it as well.
Yeah.
And these other things of this programming that's in there, right? And it's the ability, and I love how you describe it too, because I totally agree. It's the software and the hardware. Our mind, our consciousness is the software. Our brains and body are the hardware. But the software, we need to learn how to reprogram that, right? And learning how to reprogram it it's something that it's not like I can't delete something. I actually have to almost reprogram over something else until I let it go. So that becomes the primary program in our belief set and our minds that we want to actually accomplish, being the I can versus the I can't. And, you know, it's exactly, and that self relationship, right? Like for me, it's that relationship with that self when, you know, no one's around. All the voices in my head, when they start going, are they positive or negative? One of the tools I use is every day I try to write out in my notebook 3 pages, and it's just stream of consciousness. And I get out all, especially anyone who I coach, I always recommend at the beginning, especially for 6 months, write out all your thoughts, write out 3 pages, whatever, even if it is, I have no idea what to write. This guy, David, is an asshole for making me do this. I can't believe I'm doing this. But eventually you'll get to a point of where all that negativity, all that shit that's in the software and the brain gets out. So you can actually now input new programs.
Exactly. I love that. That's so powerful. And that's something for your coach, for your clients, that's a real gift, because I know how powerful that is. Yeah, because the thing is that we're too much in our heads. And what if you really want to go to the real you, the truth, then you have to basically exhaust the answers that you have ready stored in your head, right? So when you do the writing down, your head gets empty because it knows it is now get out. You don't have to think about it anymore, right? And especially this is also powerful for people, which I think is one of the foundations of having a very successful ADHD life, is writing down these thoughts before you sleep. And sleeping is, sleeping is the one that's really one of the foundations. And if that doesn't work, and some people are struggling with sleep, especially because they're dosing across. I don't do medication, but I know from people who told me that they're dosing these medications during the day, and then they forget something. Then they take these long extended release ones, and then you kind of get a struggle, like you're overwhelmed, and then how you get to sleep again, how you turn yourself off, and then so sleep is really vital, right? You could rather have drinking drunk, or like being really drunk, drive a car, than really had bad sleep and drive a car, right?
Yeah.
The only thing is that they don't detect it when they test you, except that you can say, look, a police officer,
and the passed out sleep from getting drunk or getting so high that you pass out is actually not actual sleep. That's actually your body's which is, because I know for a long time, I used to treat my ADHD I still enjoy the occasional marijuana from time to time. I know there's some benefits, but when I go overboard on it and I use it as a sleep aid, I knew I wasn't actually getting restful sleep. I was just more of flooding my system so much that I would conk myself out, but I actually wasn't rejuvenating. It was almost more of like, instead of hitting the sleep button on your laptop, I was like throwing the laptop on the ground, smashing it turned off, and then you pick it back up the next day and you're like, oh, why is it not turning on?
Yeah, I like that metaphor. That's a really good example. A lot of people look at different behaviors. Oh, everybody's doing that, and you just copy it. But what are the effects of it? I like that one, because that's do you want to treat your let's not say your PC but do you want to treat your PC or MacBook like that? And what about your mind, right, or your body? It's like, yeah, if you become aware about that kind of stuff, then yeah, then you're still, a lot of people still find excuses to get to marijuana or other stimulants, alcohol, or that kind of stuff. And the question is then, who are you telling a lie to, right? Occasionally it can be fine, but usually what you see is that over time, these habits become adapt, and you kind of like need it.
And
But
that's when it goes
look,
into addiction, right? Because when it goes
yeah,
from when you no longer have choice or control, and it becomes
yes,
from want to need, that I need to do this in order to, like, I was a cigarette smoker for many, many years, and it was,
yeah, me
I
too.
need a cig, right? And that's also goes back to that programming that you're saying of like the language, right? Like,
Yes.
do I need it? No, I want it, right? And I had to change, and I tried to stop so many times. It did help with the pill though. Like Chantix was a stop smoking pill that helped, but I tried that a couple of times, but it took that with a combination of mindset shift
Yeah.
of Alan Carr's Quit Smoking Now book was another one that kind of helped me make that shift. We're wrapping up towards the end of the hour here. I know we could, I would love to, we could talk all day. I love talking with you,
Yes.
Jonathan. It's a fantastic,
Thank you for having me.
yeah, this is a fantastic subject. So we want to wrap up here. Do you have a couple of tips, maybe like your top 3 tips you could give to the guys that have helped you, or that you maybe to your clients that help with ADHD, that help them kind of solve kind of some of the daily issues that we suffer with ADHD?
Yeah. Yeah. So first of all, let me start with what you ended with, is like smoking. So I didn't read a book. Of course, there's a lot of books out there, and if that's good. What I found is that I started to dissect smoking, right? I started to dissect and do stop smoking. It's really bad for you. It really lowers the blood flow to your brain. The prefrontal cortex specifically suffers from that, which is a leading cause of more severe side effects of the ADHD. But if you dissect smoking, right, it's like you have the cigarette, right? But try to smoke the cigarette without the real cigarette, and then right? And if you do that a couple of times, you actually find that that breathing technique calms you down. And one of the things I learned from NLP is that, so advertising creates the meaning of the cigarette. So you take the cigarette and you associate that feeling to what you just did before. Yeah. That's how they sell stuff like that, right? That's marketing. But it's actually the breathing that is actually causing that feeling. And that is one of the things that I use to stop smoking. And the second part is that I never told anyone that I stopped smoking, that I even tried, because I knew that if I stopped smoking, I wouldn't want, yeah, then people start to give you feedback. Oh yeah, well, very good. Like, okay, in a couple of weeks, and then you need it. And then 3 months in, so, oh, it's him again, right? he wants some feedback, right? So I always said like, oh, I'm still smoking. And then sometimes you do it. It's your own process. Make it your own process and know that it's just breathing. That's actually the giving you the good feeling. So just know. And then the second thing is that, yeah, definitely unlabel yourself. That is what I live by, and I still do. There's a lot of stuff to do still, but unidentify you with ADHD. Do recognize the bad stuff. Yeah, do recognize, do own that, and find a way to get help. And there are less intrusive ways with medication, like neurofeedback, for example, which really rewires the brain in such a way so the whole brain starts to work together. It creates new neural networks, specifically around the prefrontal cortex. It's a proven technology. It's called alternative medicine, but it is it's like been there for 50 years already, right? It's very powerful. I found it really good. It's a sort of brain training technology. And and that's good. And also know that even if you have severe ADHD, that there's also treatments in development around, they call it like these hyperbaric chambers. So, I recommend, so I found like Dr. Daniel Amen really interesting. He references several treatments. And one of the most revolutionary, I haven't tried that myself, to be really fair, but I am looking to get that and also recommend it to my clients, because look, I didn't have like an injury, like a brain injury, right? I don't know if you look at the inside of your brain, there's a lot of Sharpie razor sharp edges. And if you shake it, you can damage the connection with the prefrontal cortex. So if that is the cause, then we probably have to get to certain conditions where the hyperbaric oxygen chamber will get pressure in the chamber, and with high octane or high levels of oxygen that goes really deep into your body, but also in your brain. And it also brings the nutrients deeper in the brain, and it starts to get a restoration thing going on.
It's the activation, right? Because oxygen in particular, right? Like, I love your example with the smoking thing too, because it's the power of oxygen, right? Of when it oxygenates our blood, oxygenates the brain and the cells and everything in there. It's like giving yourself a big kind of hit, right? It's like, boom, you're hitting yourself with all this energy, right? And it's
exactly. And just to round it up, the oxygen, if hyperbaric, can be expensive. They have these chambers for 10,000 for at home use, but if you really want to bring in more oxygen, I do this exercise 3 times a day. It's like a breathing exercise. I do that 3 sets of 10, and it's like breathe in like 4 seconds, and then hold it for 20 seconds, and then breathe it out in 8, right?
Ooh, I haven't I love that one. I'm going to definitely try that one. I love different breath techniques. So that's a really cool
one. Try this one, because this really puts in a lot of energy in your body, because you breathe it in and you push the oxygen deep into your lungs, and then because the CO2 still goes out, right? But the second thing what you're doing is your body, like in the lower end of your body, you have to fill it up, right? Like a bottle, and fill it up. It also influences the lymphic system. And the lymphic system is the sewer system of your body, right? So, that cleans up toxins, chemicals, but also dead cells as well. And if that process works well, then you also start to feel energized, or more energized, because your cells, your body cells, are living in a more alkalized environment, right? So more optimized environment, so that you can thrive and have better energy. So
that is amazing.
Those are my tips.
Yeah, those are great. Those are excellent tips. Thank you so much, Jonathan. So if someone wanted to get a hold of you or contact you, do you have a website or an email that they could reach you at?
Yeah, you can go to www.unlabelyourself.com.
I love it. And I will grab that link for you, and I will put that in the description as well. Jonathan, thank you so much for being my guest this week. I really appreciate it. We learned so much. I loved the Unlabel Yourself. Guys, definitely go check out Jonathan. And as I like to do, very good, yay. I wish you all a great, if not better day.
Thank you for having me. Have a good day, everyone.
And out.